Now, when our next guest became a surgeon back in the 60s, he could have opted for a lucrative career working in hospitals in Europe and the States.
But Dr. Dom Colbert didn't want a regular cosy life and instead embarked on a career saving lives all the way over in Africa and in the Middle East. Dr. Dom, you're very, very welcome to the show. We'll chat about your book because there are lots of different stories in there. First of all, we want to show a picture. This is you in Rwanda queuing for food. Why did you opt for this life as opposed to, as I said, a handy, cosy life here in Ireland as a doctor?
I think I always wanted to work in other places for the poor, really. It sounds a bit boastful, but I really did since I was a kid. And luckily enough, when I qualified, I had a wife, married a wife young. We were both very young, and she let me off.
She supported your dream?
In everything, she supported my dream, and I wrote these 2 books beside her bed while she was dying, and she never got to read them, unfortunately. Or this book, yeah. Anyway.
And you have worked in war zones, famine zones. You've done some really brilliant things, but you're so humble about what you've done.
I should be humble because I see people, I see nurses and other doctors and Irish and Africans and Far East who do far more than I do, and there's never a beep out of them. So that's why I'm humble. It's the truth.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you see what's happening in front of you, we get to see this on the news, and we just stop for a second and we look. But you, Dom, you were there. This was happening in front of you. How do you kind of process all this?
Well, I always wanted to be a doer, not just a dreamer. And I suppose there are lots of flashbacks that come to me. Yes, even still, to be honest. And times when you feel like crying and you think about things, and I just bury it somewhere, to be honest. Yeah.
And of course, you know, medical advances in places around the world, nothing like what we have here. Is it true you had to perform an amputation without anaesthetic?
Yes, I was working for John O'Shea's goal. Now, John O'Shea is a tough man, but I don't even think John would have countenanced this. We were working in South Sudan. It was a little village called Congo, surrounded by the Sudanese army. And we had to fly in. You couldn't stay there because it was very dangerous. And there were 5 nurses with me, Irish girls. And we'd go in every day or every second day, depending on the fighting, and we'd feed people and so on. But there was a prison there. And in the prison, there was a man that I was called to, and they said he was very sick. He was a Sudanese soldier. He couldn't therefore escape. And I saw he had gas gangrene in his right hand. That's like bubble paper, you know, the gas-producing organisms produce, it's deadly. Mm-hmm. I'd only seen 1 case before in my life.
But you knew exactly what it was and what had to be done.
Exactly what it was, and it had to be amputated. All I had was the scissors and a couple of forceps and 2 little ampoules of lidocaine, local anaesthetic. Mm-hmm. But there was some nylon from a fishing rod that we could use if I had to amputate. So 4 other prisoners brought him down to our clinic. They put him on the table, like a kitchen table. They held each limb. And I had to do it to save his life. I couldn't get him out, you see. Couldn't do anything.
I'd imagine it's all happening so fast that you're too busy to be nervous.
I wasn't thinking. I was too busy to be nervous. That's right, I was just stupid, if you like.
Yeah.
And I was thinking all the old days, they could do things so fast and so good, so much better than I did. Mm-hmm. Anyhow, I can remember cutting through the wrist because I had no saw, so I couldn't cut through the bones. And I can remember the man screaming and then stopped screaming when I disarticulated the wrist because he had collapsed, fainted. Mm-hmm. Sewed him up with the nylon and waited until he woke up.
But it had to be done, Dom. You saved his life.
I know. And he smiled when he woke up. He was still lying on the kitchen table. He hadn't been on an anaesthetic. He smiled. And all I saw was this dirty T-shirt that he had on him. And I know that I took mine off me, which was a gold, beautiful, lovely one I was bringing home to the kids, and I gave it to him. And he was so happy. And we hugged each other. And that's a true story, because as Brent Pope will tell you, he said, Dom, say it as it is, and they're just telling you as it is.
As it is. And you had trouble as well with landmines, even trying to avoid them, Dom.
Well, that was in the same place, funnily enough. That's another story I tell.
Sudan.
Yeah, there's no privacy in Africa. They'll tell you that, the Africans themselves. You're not private anywhere. But we don't want anyone to see us making a pee.
Yeah.
Yeah. So after the clinic one day in that little town, I just had to relieve myself. So I went towards the bush. There was a little path, so I stayed in the path because I was afraid of snakes. There's a lot of snakes in South Sudan. And there was a turning about 50 yards, and I went and relieved myself. And then I was thrilled, and I came back, and all the village were out there, and even my own nurses, and they were shouting and waving at me. And I thought they were saying, because my hearing isn't that good, I thought they were saying, "You're fine, you're fine." And as I got nearer, I could hear they were saying, "It's mind, it's mind." And then I realised I was walking through a minefield. And that was the scariest moment of my life. I went off the path and tiptoed as if it made much difference towards the people, the village. And of course we had a great hugging and shouting and laughing. That scared me, yeah.
I'd imagine so.
And
Stupid.
you've worked with lepers in Nigeria as well.
Lepers are a special breed of people. You'd have to love lepers. They're kept in colonies away from the rest of us.
When I was reading this time, I thought it was something from the time of our Lord or something, because that's what we associate lepers with.
No. Lepers, there's still leprosy, even in modern day, even outside Damascus at the moment. I was in a leper colony there with my daughter, saw them. Oh, yeah. But they were so happy, these lepers, although they were kept together and segregated, and I would visit them.
Was it dangerous to be around them, Dom, was it?
It is in Daithi, because once you're on the treatment, within 48 hours, you're not infective. That's the modern treatment. And even in the old days, you'd have to live with them. You'd really have to drink out of their cups and use their spoons and nearly sleep with them,
Yeah, before you'd contact them.
Yeah, it isn't easily caught. And, I reckon there's around 200,000 lepers in the world.
Because I believe that they're there together. They marry each other and they have children and everything. I never realised this.
I didn't know that either, yeah.
That's right, they do. They have children.
And
but
in
they're
your
deformed and they're miserable.
Because you've seen so much, you almost have a philosophy of life, don't you?
Well, I have a philosophy of life, yeah, I suppose, but I don't always keep up to it. It's the kind of a thing
I think it
that I
sounds
say
wonderful.
to my students. And I said to them last week, I said, attitudes are more important than abilities. Character is more important than cleverness. Giving is more important than getting. Doing is more important than dreaming. And the most important one, the heart takes precedence over the head.
And talking of head, what was this about a frog in someone's head in Canada?
Well, you see, to fund myself, I'd have to work in Canada to make some money to get out in these places. Maybe I'm running over time now. I don't want to.
No.
Anyway, I was working in Saskatchewan, and Saskatchewan is a prairie province. And it was hot and sweaty, and it was a Friday afternoon, and it was 5:30, and just everyone was sick of the whole thing, wanted to go home, and so did I. But the nurse came up and said to me in the clinic, she said, "Dom, there's a big fat man and he has to see you." And I said, "Is he very sick?" "Yes," she said, "he has a frog on his head."
You couldn't turn him away.
Oh, gee, that's what I
the
thought.
curiosity alone, Tom.
Well, if you're, I guess you see everything. You don't walk away if there's a patient waiting. You can't. Maybe that's the old doctor. Anyway, up he came the stairs and he thumped up and he was sweating and fat and he plumped himself down and he said, "Doc, I'm a preacher and I'm a travelling preacher." I said, "That's great." I said, "That's a wonderful vocation. What about this frog?" "Yes," he said, "I've got a frog in my head. Have you seen anyone else?" "Yes, I've seen 2 doctors here and I've seen 2 psychiatrists in Saskatoon, the capital of Saskatchewan. And they can't cure me. They said there's no frog there, but I hear that frog." And I said, "Is he there now?" He said, "The frog is there now, Doc. Can you do anything to help me? It's very bad today." So I examined him, Nuala, and I found nothing wrong with him. And then typical Irish, I suppose, I just had to do something special. I picked up my stethoscope and I went over to him, like I'm going over to you now.
Yeah.
And I had my stethoscope in here and I put it on his head to listen to the frog. And I swear to God, I heard, quack, quack, quack. I did. Quack. I said, "My God, you have."
My God.
No, it was okay.
But it wasn't as it seemed.
No.
It was an aneurysm. It was an AV aneurysm. That means communication, an abnormal communication between an artery and a vein in his brain.
So it was this. It was the sound.
Heartbeat. Yes, the sound of that.
Don, we have to go. All the stories inside here. I believe you're having tea with Michael D in the next couple of weeks as well. So congratulations on that. You can find this fantastic book, No Tears Left. It's on Amazon, also thebookdispensary.com. Don, we'd be here all night talking about these fantastic stories. It's great to have you on the show.
And still to come, Brent Pope talks rugby and romance after the break. I have to stay for that.